the global stage. Global stage. Hello, welcome to the global stage. I hope you had a wonderful day. And this platform seeks to bring to you God's perspective of our universe with the purpose of unveiling the truth. And I have here with me my one and only brother, the person of
Robert Abiru.
All right. So today we want to talk to you about the Russia and the Ukraine conflict. Man of God, what do you think about all these things?
Yeah, Russia and Ukraine conflict started somewhere, and we need to know where it started, how it started. Because we don't think Russia and Ukraine from the beginning were enemies against each other. And the most important thing that we would like to know is the genesis of the whole problem.
Yeah.
So I would like to know what is Soviet Union in connection
with this conflict. Okay, so basically, our world is in a state of chaos right now as it stands, and then we are seeing some kind of geopolitical alignment with certain countries. And if you know and understand the master script, which is the Bible, you will actually understand what is happening. And that is why this platform we try to bring you the truth. We go beyond the curtain, not only bringing you the news, but going beyond it to bring you the truth of everything. So you ask of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was basically an organization or a union of 50 member states, Russia being the head, formed in the early 80s. And then it got dissolved in 1991 as a result of the communist government being destroyed. So Russia was the head, and then Ukraine, and then you have other member states that were part of that Soviet Union. And then, like I said, in 1991, it got dissolved due to the collapse of the communist states.
So Russia and Ukraine were all part of the sovereign union with a purpose, with a common purpose.
Exactly. And the purpose was to form one unified military defense against invading forces. Because at the time, Russia was like the world power when it comes to security. Even now it still stands, but Russia was more powerful at that time. So that is the Soviet Union.
So the next question that I would like to ask for us to clarify for our viewers to understand is NATO, because we keep hearing NATO in this whole thing. What is NATO? What does it have to? What is NATO trying to do, or what is their play in the whole matter?
Okay. So I believe our viewers have been hearing about NATO in connection with this conflict between Russia and then Ukraine. So basically, when we say NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it's basically an intergovernmental organization. And I would like to read to our viewers what it actually means. So NATO, like I said, stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it is an intergovernmental military alliance between 27 European countries, 2 North American countries, and 1 Asian country. Now, this organization implements the North Atlantic Treaty that was signed on 4th April 1949. So that was when the treaty was signed, that initiation started. And then the main purpose of this NATO was to agree to form a mutual defense in response of an attack of an invading or an external party. So basically what NATO stands for is basically countries coming together to form one unified defense against any external invading force.
Just like Soviet Union.
Just like the Soviet Union was in the early 80s. Then it got dissolved in the 1991. So NATO now is about some European countries coming together, North American, and then 1 Asian country, joining to form one mutual unified defense against any external invading enemy. So that is what NATO stands for.
So my next question is, looking at what Soviet Union stands for and then what NATO stands for, we could see that Ukraine and Russia happens to be in Soviet Union, having the same purpose. So why is Russia invading Ukraine right now, or what is Russia trying to take or to get in Ukraine that is bringing the whole of this conflict?
All right, so there is a treaty that was signed, I think, I like to also go back and let our viewers know what it means. A treaty that was signed in the early 90s. It was called the Malta Summit between the US-Soviet relationship, that is US government and the Soviet Union, Russia. And I'd like to read to you what it was about, that the understanding of that treaty was about. The global stage. The global stage. So, let me explain the genesis of this conflict. Now, in 1989, the then president, that is W.H. Bush, and the Soviet leader, that is Gorbachev, met at a summit called the Malta Summit. And this is what they said. I want to read the treaty to our viewers.
Okay.
It says, during the Malta Summit in December 1989, that the US would not take advantage of the revolutions in Eastern Europe to harm Soviet interests. But neither Bush nor Gorbachev at that point expected so soon the collapse of East Germany or the speed of the German unification. The first concrete assurances by Western leaders on NATO began on January 31st, 1990, when the West German Foreign Minister Hans Dietrich opened the bidding with a major public speech at Husey in Bavaria on German unification. The US Embassy in Bonn informed Washington that Gorbachev made clear that the changes in Eastern Europe and the German unification process must not lead to an impairment of Soviet security interest. So it's about security interest.
Yes.
Now he says, therefore, NATO should not rule out an expansion of their territory towards the east. So this was the understanding at that summit
between the two
unions, that NATO should not expand their military base towards the east, which is Russia and Ukraine at their border. Now, years have passed. NATO is now luring Ukraine to join them. And if Ukraine should join them, that would mean that NATO cannot expand their borders to the borders of Russia.
And that makes Ukraine to be alone.
Yes, and Ukraine becomes part of NATO. NATO can now begin to expand its military base close to the borders of Russia, because Russia and Ukraine share some few meters differences. And now Russia says, no, we cannot allow a potential enemy to come very close to us. Therefore, we won't allow Ukraine to join NATO. This is the genesis of the conflict. So for Russia, it is about security. For Ukraine, it is about security also, but more of economic progress. So this was the understanding during that summit in 1989. Now, NATO is trying to breach that contract per the understanding of Russia. And Russia says no, they can't allow that to happen.
Right now, NATO is trying to invade or moving its border closer than they promised. By letting Ukraine to join them and the EU as well. So once Ukraine is able to join them, now NATO can have the powers, the legal powers to now extend their borders close to the shores of Russia. And that is a threat.
That's a threat to Russia. So Russia, Russia is known for security. And they say no. So this is the genesis of everything as it stands now.
So we could say that Russia is acting or doing all what they are doing because of their own security.
Exactly. And then one other thing is that when Russia got to know of the intention of NATO luring Ukraine to join them, they quickly had to declare two independent states of Ukraine. So now I want to read something. No, it says pro-Russian separatist regions in Donetsk and Luhansk declared independence from Ukraine in 2014. So Donetsk and Luhansk see themselves as independent from Ukraine, and they declared themselves to be independent states in 2014. Now, at that time, Russia did not internationally recognize them as independent states. But when Russia got to know of NATO's intention to lure Ukraine to join them, he quickly internationally recognized these two states as independent so that he could have access to that land, that is Donetsk and Luhansk, so that he can also set up his military base there to prevent NATO or Ukraine from entering. So as it stands now, Russia has moved his military base to Donetsk and Luhansk so that he could prevent NATO and EU from entering their borders. So we would like to show you a video of that. Take a watch.
Part of an escalation that shows no signs of stopping, killing 2 Ukrainian soldiers and injuring 4, with ceasefire violations more than doubling over the last few days. Inside Russian-backed separatist-controlled areas, a call to arms. I call on all men in the Republic able to hold a weapon in their hands to stand up to protect your families, he says. As thousands of women and children evacuate Donbass, staying in hastily set up tents inside Russia. It's all part of what the Ukrainians allege could be a pretext for Russia to attack Ukraine. Allegations Moscow denies. Meanwhile, in Belarus, Russian President Vladimir Putin flexing his country's nuclear muscles, launching ballistic and cruise missiles. While in Munich, despite U.S. warnings Russia could try to block his return, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged the West to sanction Russia now, saying, "You're telling me that it's 100% that the war will start in a couple of days? What are you waiting for?" President Zelensky also called for security guarantees while Ukraine works toward NATO membership.
But for Ukraine, I mean, we view NATO as the only option for us to have that peace of mind.
That peace of mind also a red line for President Putin. This morning, the Defense Ministry in Belarus announced the extension of its joint exercises with Russian forces, citing the situation in Donbass, seen as yet another ominous sign that the situation is deteriorating. Willie.
Aaron McLaughlin starting us off in Ukraine this morning. Aaron, thanks
All right.
so much.
I have another question. You know, with all what we are doing right here on this platform, it's revealing God's intent and his purpose concerning everything. So in this matter, I would like to know, what is the Bible perspective about what is happening
So
between Russia
and then you see,
Ukraine?
you know, everything that is happening right now from the United States, that is the UN, and the EU is only lip service. You know, the more they agitate Russia, the more Russia becomes isolated. And the more Russia becomes isolated, the more Russia answers to no one. You see the thing? So, and if Russia answers to no one, Russia can do whatever he wants. And as said from the master scripture, which is the Bible, we are not going to see a defeated or weakened Russia now. Whatever is happening right now will communicate or will enter into something bigger in the near future. That will be the Third World War, or the War of Armageddon. So right now, what we see is just a precursor of what is about to happen in the near future. So Russia, as it stands now, has taken over Ukraine, has invaded Ukraine. All the sanctions United Nations is talking about, America is talking about, it's only lip service. Nothing will happen to them. It is only a political show as it stands now. Yeah.
So has the NATO, as it stands now, has NATO recognized Ukraine as part?
No, as it stands now. Now, here is the interesting thing. When we watch the video, the president of Ukraine, before the invasion, pleaded with NATO and EU to put a sanction on Russia to prevent them from invading their territories. Now, the reply they got was that we cannot put a sanction on Russia until they invade you because of diplomacy. Now, if you say you care about Ukraine, there is an invading enemy coming to your territory. What stops you from preventing that invasion?
And you know what invasion can do?
Exactly.
It can lies, property.
Exactly. So are you waiting for that enemy to destroy lives and livelihood before you put a sanction on them? Now, the truth is that those in Russia and Ukraine and even Europe know that anything UN and EU saying against Russia will not hold. It is only lip service. And actually, there are actually globalists behind these things. No, now this conflict is actually a distraction for the world, because those who are responsible for COVID-19 and all the deaths and the implications, the economic implications, are trying to distract the world from facing the consequences. So this is actually a distraction for the world as it stands now. And the same people who were behind COVID are the same people behind this conflict, instigating it, because they know that if Russia invades Ukraine, nothing can be done to Russia. All the sanctions they're talking about is just only lip service. Yeah.
So you said something very important. You said this is something building towards Third World War, which is Armageddon. That means that this is something that is heading towards the end of the world.
Exactly.
And the end of the world, the war that will happen, is what Russia and Ukraine have started.
Exactly. So what we see right now is just a precursor, it's just a rehearsal of what is about to happen in the near future.
Just to pave way.
Exactly. So when people say this is the Third World War, it is not true. This is just a small conflict. I see it. And Russia will always have its way, because we are not going to see a defeated and weak Russia now. And you know, one good ally of Russia is China. And you know, these two countries have strong military base, and as it stands now, no country will be able to defeat them. But in the near future, the future and the end of Russia will come. And I think in our next segment, we'll talk about why Ukraine matters, and then the end and the future of Russia.
Right. Thank you very much for your enlightenment. This is where the whole matter started. And that the most important thing that I would like you to look at it is this way. When we see things like this happening, don't just take it as it is. You have to do your study, do your research. It is not as what the news is reporting. It is not as what you are seeing. Especially biblically, it has a meaning. That is what you need to look at, and where it will end. Remember, everything is covered by the word of God. And after everything, do your diligent research. And the end of it matters. What is the implication physically and spiritually? Thank you very much. And our next segment will be able to give you more updates as we continue. Thank you very much.
The global stage. The global stage.